Yeah, thank you for being here today as we introduce Bill 39. If passed, this bill will make the necessary legislative changes to enact key policies we brought forward in Budget 2025. As you know, we've hit some uncertain economic times, and that's a bit of an understatement when we factor in U.S. tariffs and the whiplash policies coming from our neighbors to the south. And the reality is that after expanding about 3% last year, Alberta's real GDP growth is forecast to drop to 1.8% in 2025 and 1.7% in 2026. It's a stormy time, but Budget 2025 meets this challenge by including plans that account for this uncertainty. And as part of these plans, we're proposing amendments to 8 pieces of legislation. You have a full list of these amendments in your package, but today I'd like to highlight some key ones. We're creating a new 8% tax bracket on the first $60,000 of income. These amendments would make the necessary changes to the Alberta Personal Income Tax Act to implement this tax cut. This is expected to put more than $1 billion back into the bank accounts of Albertans in 2025. If passed, this tax cut would build on that advantage, saving individuals up to $750 in 2025. This bill also includes proposed amendments to the Sustainable Fiscal Planning and Reporting Act to increase our flexibility in using surplus cash to improve Alberta's net financial position. When economic times are tough, it's a very real reminder of the imperative to plan for a better future, even while we meet immediate needs. If passed, these changes would allow government to allocate 50% of surplus cash toward repaying debt or investing in the Heritage Fund instead of just repaying debt. It's about making sure we focus on improving Alberta's overall net financial position rather than being solely focused on debt repayment. And these changes would help us reach our goal to build the Heritage Fund to the point where the fund's earnings reduce our reliance on non-renewable resource revenue. This bill also includes proposed changes to the Legal Profession Act. If passed, the changes increase the statutory contribution by the Alberta Law Foundation to Legal Aid Alberta to 50% from 25%. Changes would also require ministerial approval of all Alberta Law Foundation grants, gifts, and funding commitments over $250,000. These amendments, if passed, would ensure important Legal Aid Alberta funding is maintained while also balancing the needs of access to justice grant funding. These are just a few of the highlights in this legislation, but I'd like to close by saying that these uncertain economic times require cautious and prudent decisions. We need to meet the challenge of providing for the needs of our growing province in a way that also sets us up for future success. Budget 2025 is our prudent path forward to meet this challenge. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move to the media Q&A. A reminder that everything said in this press conference is embargoed until the bill is tabled this afternoon at approximately 3 o'clock. We'll start in the room. One question, one follow-up, name and outlet. Minister Amory is also here to take questions. Go ahead, Shay.
Thank you. Shay Lanskovsky with CTV News Edmonton. Just unrelated, on Scott Sinclair's removal from caucus, he raised several concerns with your budget, suggesting rural centres are left-footing the bill for big cities and saying that healthcare in rural parts of the province has hit rock bottom. I'm wondering what your response is to that criticism, and if there's no room for amendments to your budget, and if you supported to see him removed.
Well, first off, I'd say that was a caucus decision. You know, you support the budget when you're part of the caucus of government. That's a well-known fact of how government works. I think that any concerns that the member had, you know, we did our best to show what was really in the budget around things that were important to him, what it meant for his riding, whether that be transportation or healthcare or otherwise. So I'm very confident. We're trying our best to meet the needs of a vast province, you know, in every corner. And, you know, it's difficult for private members to always see some of that process. I was a private member not that long ago, but I very much believe that the process accounts for all of those concerns, whether they be regional concerns, whether they be working with ministers to find out what their priorities are, and then making sure it all fits into a plan that the province can afford when it comes to capital that they can actually build in the time frame. That's a concern for my office always. So I think the process is robust and fair, and that's about all I have to say about that.
Follow up.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, just wondering about some clarity. I'm not sure if it's particular to this bill, but on the adoptive parent changes, we've also heard some concerns since the budget was first introduced about a new provision that would means test basic maintenance parent payments for children who have been adopted. Is this the case? If so, why? And how, I guess the motivation for the province doing this, is it saving money? If so, how much?
Well, for the change that's here, this is basically stopping a program that never started. You know, and I tell my ministers all the time, you know, make sure as we bring things forward, it's not only defensible, but it fits in a way that the province can afford going forward. Any other changes I'm unaware of in that file, I'd take them up with the minister. But I would say at a high level, I think whether it's looking at, you know, fees or income testing, I think the province has to do those things. You know, that's the position we're in. If we're going to be a low tax jurisdiction, we have to look at those things across the board.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Catherine Gurkowski, Alberta Today. So on that, the changes that are in the bill, you're not going ahead with the supplementary health benefits. It's expected to save about $3 million. Did you do any cost-benefit analysis of how much this might cost by not providing this? By maybe a child does not get adopted? Like, can you explain the process why this $3 million savings was a priority?
Well, we certainly went through the process when we built the program, you know, made them prove to us why it was important and go through the rationale. But when we went through our program review process, we're looking at things that, you know, maybe the province needs to cut back on or scale back on, and this was one that was identified. I know $3 million may not sound like much, but if you want to worry about the dollars, you better take care of the dimes, and that's what we're going to be doing going forward.
You have a follow-up, Catherine?
Yeah, and maybe on some of these Alberta Law Foundation changes, there had been concern that by doing this and making the Alberta Law Foundation have to pay more, that they're worried that the province is going to scale back. So what would you say to those concerns that the legal aid funding is only going to stay the same if other programs that otherwise would have been funded by the Law Foundation don't get the same money?
We have the Minister of Justice with us. I'd maybe pass it over to him.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. First and foremost, I think that Albertans have indicated to all of us that they want us to be good stewards of their taxpayer dollars. And they want us to find innovative ways to continue to deliver access to justice. And that's really the fundamental area of my mandate letter, to improve access to justice for all Albertans. In my view, legal aid is sort of that foundational program that provides for access to our courts, access to counsel, access to justice in the most fundamental way. And so looking at some of the ways that we can improve on legal aid funding, make sure that they are well funded and sustainable for the long-term future. And also to look at ways in aligning the way that the Alberta Law Foundation's contributions align with some of the similar agencies that fund in other provinces. We thought that this was a good way of making sure that legal aid would be sustainable for the long term, and that's exactly what the plan here is.
Thanks, Minister. Janet?
Question for the Finance Minister first. So the adoption benefits changes, like when your government brought these in 2023, when I believe Minister Amory was the Children's Services Minister, it was part of encouraging, the sort of environment of encouraging more adoption to happen in Alberta because people were less inclined to do that. So has anything changed in your government's philosophy about adoption or support or encouragement of adoption?
No, I think all of that rationale still exists. I think it just reflects the challenging forecast, the challenging economic times of dealing with a growing province with all of this uncertainty. And in my opinion, you know, we'll need to look at many other programs. But the rationale behind it, I think the feeling is still the same.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, actually this is for both of you if you don't mind. In 2022, former Ethics Commissioner Marguerite Trussler had proposed a public communications log or registry for all lobbying activities. And it was her top recommendation for review of the act. And I'm just wondering, like, now that there are questions about who is lobbying which minister when and who's having contact with who, whether you've given any second thought or you have any appetite for changing the rules to create a log so the public does know who met with who communicated with who.
Well, I think we always want to have, full, as much transparency as possible, but I'd maybe pass it on to the Minister of Justice.
Yeah, well, certainly, much like what the Finance Minister said, we are in regular talks with the Ethics Commissioner and the Ethics Commissioner's office, and we take their recommendations very seriously, so everything is always on the table. If it makes for good policy, then you can expect that this government will be looking at it very seriously.
But they turned it down, right? The MLAs from both parties turned it down at the time.
That may be the case, but as I said, if it makes sense in the current climate and if it makes sense for the future, then we certainly would not be opposed to looking at it and talking to the Ethics Commissioner. We do have regular conversations with him and with his office. I certainly do myself as well, and there is regular conversations that take place between my office and the Ethics Commissioner on recommendations that make sense and that would be appropriate and ideal for the current climate. Thank you.
Jack, anyone else in the room? Okay, operator, we'll go to the phones. Can you put through our first caller?
We don't have any questions over the phone right now. Thank you.
Thanks, operator. That concludes our press conference.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.